Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, America. How about a conversation about the Enterprise Multiverse? I think it's an amazing time now that we're finishing the year to have such a discussion. And Rachel, welcome on stage. She will do an amazing job moderating the session. Welcome all.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you again for having us here. We are all so excited to be here. My name is Rachel Wolfson. I'm a journalist with Cointelegraph, and I'm an enterprise blockchain analyst with Quantum Economics, and I'll be moderating this panel today. I'm going to go ahead and let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. So, David, would you like to start?
I'm first of all really pleased to be here at the European Blockchain Convention. My name's David Palmer. I'm the blockchain lead for Vodafone Business. Been working with Vodafone to explore blockchain technologies for the past 4 years, and very excited to have that discussion in the context of the metaverse today.
Great. Rowan, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Rachel, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Rowan Fenn. I'm the co-founder and CEO of RiseXO, based in Perth in Australia. And we build enterprise platform for industrial companies to help them build digital autonomous organizations on top of blockchain technology.
Wonderful. Angel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. And thank you all for inviting us from Telefonica. I'm Angel Garcia. I work in Telefonica. I'm in the global supply chain function, so I'm an operations guy. I'm far from technology or from digitalization directly, so to speak. But you guys, I believe, invited us because we've got one of the biggest blockchains for supply chain in the world. And we've got it, it's in production, obviously, and it's fully integrated in our operations. So I think we're starting to take the first steps into the metaverse, so to speak. So thanks for inviting us.
Wonderful. William?
Yeah, thank you. My name is William Herpelrath, running enterprise blockchain by and large here at Chainlink Labs. And Chainlink probably is best known for being the kind of the core infrastructure that has been powering DeFi for much of the last few years. But that same infrastructure has tremendous implications for the enterprise space. And so we're really excited about all the different opportunities that we see coming to us in that area. And some of that might come up today.
Great. And Rudolfo?
Yes, very happy once again to be at the EBC. I'm glad they had a chance to invite me once again. Really, nothing has changed on my end. My name is Rodolfo Quijano. I'm still the head of blockchain at Henkel for the last 3 years. So like David, helping out our enterprise to make sense of blockchain and put that into our processes. If for those of you who don't know, Henkel is a German company, and they basically what we do is we produce adhesive technologies, beauty care products, and also laundry and home care products all around the world.
Wonderful. Thank you, panelists, for the great introductions. Let's get started with the first question. So what is the metaverse and how does it relate to enterprise blockchain? And anybody can go ahead and start.
Thanks, Rachel. I think it's a great question and a great space because it is so undefined. I think enterprise multiverse might become the new digital transformation. I think there's a lot of potential ways or divergent views in terms of what this enterprise multiverse might look like. But the one that we're interested in is the one where every single company has a digital autonomous twin of their real world organization, which governs, operates, and controls their analog operations, and where these digital autonomous organizations can interact and transact with each other in real time in an economy which operates in an entirely abstract space, which we would think of as sort of being a metaverse or a multiverse. And also where these digital autonomous organizations can work together to affect the most productive operating format in the analog world, so that we have the most efficient, most effective version of our global industrial infrastructure. And I think we care about this version of the multiverse because this copy of the multiverse, we can use this technology to produce more goods and services to meet the demands of our global population who's growing larger, living longer, getting richer, and also use less of the planet's resources in doing it. So it helps us reduce the carbon intensity of our global industrial ecosystems. And this allows us to start to move away from a finite economy where we're ultimately dependent on extractive industries and linear business models, and start to move towards that world where we have more of an infinite economy. And while it does seem a little bit out there, the journey has started. We're working on this every day, taking small steps every day. It's not a far go. It's actually just a hop, skip, and a jump away. And it's important that we get there as fast as we can if we want to increase the carrying capacity of the planet. So that's how we look at the enterprise multiverse, and that's why we think it's important. But I'd love to hear some views from the other panelists.
Yeah, I'd maybe like to go next. And I think, you know, it would have been difficult to have this conversation maybe 5-10 years ago, because I think we're at the time now where we're having the intersection of technologies on a level that is unparalleled. And I think the metaverse, the way I see it, is a framework bringing all of this together. So the way I see the metaverse is a virtual world where you know, we can offer new virtual experiences and ownership using technologies like AR, VR, and AI. But I'm also seeing that in the metaverse and that ownership, you have finance. So things like DeFi, NFTs, maybe CBDCs powered by blockchain allow ownership in that metaverse. So if you look at one of the metaverse experiences as gaming, then you know, blockchain, NFTs, DeFi allow you to own assets in the game and transact it. So that's the metaverse experience layer. But then there's a physical layer, and I think this is what Rowan was getting to, which is that the metaverse will not create a digital experience or a digital world that is divorced from the real world. You know, our identities in the real world, so our digital identities in the real world, will allow us to vote in the real world, but also have a say in a DAO in a metaverse world. In the same way, the wallet that we use to transact real world transactions, pay our mortgage, buy our crypto, could be the same wallet that we use to buy assets in the metaverse. You know, if we buy art, we can print that on a 3D printer. So one of the things that I think we've been missing in the discussion of the metaverse is that translation from digital experience and ownership to real world experience and ownership. And from a telco point of view, I believe that you can almost see the mobile phone and telco and connectivity as the middleware that's joining these two worlds. With digital identities and currencies playing a medium exchange. Of course, the finance side is important. Of course, data will span from real world to physical worlds. And I think that the ecosystem that organizations like Meta or previously Facebook and their announcement, you know, the social media companies will bring ecosystem to this and adoption quickly. But I believe that the metaverse enterprise will be applications and solutions that span all three of these things. Yeah, I hope that made sense. I'm saying quite a lot there, but yeah.
Right, I find it actually quite interesting, these two definitions, right? Generally, when you hear this word of anything ending in verse or metaverse, multiverse, whatever, you immediately go back to these recent announcements that David said of what Facebook had to say on the metaverse topic, which is honestly how we had kind of looked at it from our perspective. I also had a couple of people on my team who were quite enthusiastic in looking at this topic of the metaverse and the potential to do, let's say, NFT-based use cases in this metaverse for us. Jump into that quite quickly. And from that perspective, at least you think about it as a brand a little bit more than let's say, maybe an individual in that perspective, right? Because at least for us, it's important to understand how a company that is producing maybe fast-moving consumer goods can make use of this, let's say, new digital environment or virtual or metaverse or whatever you want to call it, to, as David said, kind of expand the consumer experience you would have, right? And then build a brand story. Potentially, I guess, for those thinking very further ahead, how does that, how would your product that today is sold physically then be able to be sold digitally in the future, right? It's something that's quite difficult also for people to get their heads around, but at least these kind of topics get the discussion started. And what I found interesting in Rowan's perspective is, okay, let's maybe forget this fancy social media stuff. Let's just look at it more from a perspective of digital twin, right? Which is maybe at the heart of what more enterprises do, especially manufacturers like us. And I honestly hadn't given it any thought in that perspective, right? And I find that quite interesting to think about. Okay, maybe yes, there will be some brand stories built on these metaverses and whatever, and people might be able to buy our hairstyles or whatever in these via NFTs in this metaverse. But what if we then also actually looked at the physical products and our suppliers not as physical entities, but as something that you digitally model, then you can actually work and transact with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just come in quickly there and just say that what's interesting about that is how the metaverse and the current supply chains can then span to digital supply chains in the metaverse. And are we thinking of that? But that's maybe further along. Sorry, William.
Oh no, I think the metaverse, the reality is it's going to be whatever we want it to be. In the same way the internet is whatever we want it to be, right? If it's an extension, if it's a logical, organic extension of what the internet already is, then the internet is already everything to all people. You know, it's both this amazing play. To be honest, it's both this amazing place where amazing things happen and amazing commerce occurs, and it's also kind of a scary place where some other stuff happens too. So all of these things are probably going to happen in the metaverse, and companies are going to exist there the same way they exist in the internet. They're going to have to deal with all the same challenges that they have, you know, in the internet. And, you know, I'm at this panel today and we're interested specifically because we believe that a lot of that's going to be decentralized, and that we're not all going to trust the same way the internet is decentralized. We're not going to all trust all of our entire ecosystem to one provider. And so the more decentralized that is, the more that, you know, networks like Chainlink are going to play roles in that. But I think it's going to be up to all of us to decide how much this is a decentralized workplace, how much this is a decentralized environment where people can interact without necessarily taking direct, you know, huge trust in individual parties, and how much of it is going to be a decentralized location where, you know, things can be transacted and adjudicated through a network and not necessarily you know, just through individual corporations.
So I'd like for the panelists to kind of discuss actual use cases of the metaverse being applied at your companies. So yeah, who would like to go first?
I can jump in and join from the previous conversation a little bit, and again, from an operations perspective, not a theoretical blockchain or metaverse guy. These new technologies open like a huge amount of opportunities from an operations perspective to improve operations. And I love the concept that you guys, I think it was Rowan and David, were talking about the digital twin and how we get, you know, our physical world into the digital world. We in Telefonica, we're trying to do it step by step. I mean, again, I'm an operations guy. We avoid risks at every step, right? We want the right product to be at the right time in the right place. That's the most important thing. But again, these digital new technologies open a huge amount of opportunities. So what we're doing first is trying to break silos of information. So little by little. So as soon as we have all the information shared among all the different participants, because again, at the end, the supply chains are global, right? The product doesn't understand about companies or people. The product just flows. So if we get all the information, if we can make that joint supply chain in the digital world for everyone, that, you know, that's the way to make things more efficient and speed up everything. So our first approach was, let's put everything in this multiverse digital blockchain, you know, that is not Telefonica's information, is the supply chain, the global end-to-end supply chains with all the participants' information. That's where we are right now, right? We're getting a lot of valuable information and improving our processes, our end-to-end processes with all our the companies involved in the process. The next step would be to start automating more business processes, like real processes, like payments, guarantees, I don't know, anything that you can think of, you can automate it on top of that trusted layer of information that is, again, it's centralized and it's for everyone. And the last one, which we're a little bit far from there, I believe, it's how do we create value out of that, right? And I think there are several possibilities there. But again, we're still, from our side, from an operation side, we've only taken the first step, which is having the information flow end to end and share there in a digital world, right? Make sense?
If I may comment, I mean, what I would say is, the metaverse is something that we're moving towards. So I wouldn't say the metaverse exists completely now. It's a transition. I think Rowan said that we're aiming towards. But what we can talk about is the sort of technologies like blockchain, like AR, VR. That we're working on, digital identity, for example, which are key enablers or key components that will be part of that end state that we get to. And I think maybe there's been a rush to say, right, the metaverse is here because we had the announcement from Meta. But in reality, especially for business, it's something that we're transitioning towards. So in terms of blockchain, I think the key thing for us is digital identity. So digital identity across people, business, and things. Self-sovereign digital identity, how that fits into our ecosystem is something that's key that we're working on. And I believe in the metaverse, the digital identity of people, business, and things will be critical to how we make that transition from the real world to the virtual world, and how those things are synchronized, and also how we regulate it. Because one of the things about the virtual world is if you buy something in a game or you buy land from Decentraland, what is the custody on that? What is the jurisdiction? How do you deal with resolution disputes? So I believe that digital identity across people, business, and things is key. That's something we're actively working on. I also, like Angel, think that supply chain logistics will be key, and the provenance of supply chain using blockchain and IoT is also important as well. And I think one of the challenges that we have, or one of the opportunities we have, depending on how you look at it, is how supply chain can be extended to look at supply chain in the metaverse, right? The digital side of it, and how communication can be extended to look at how we communicate in the metaverse as well. So those are things that we're looking at, and then of course on the sort of experience side. Gaming, NFTs are all things. I think there's an announcement today that Vodafone will be auctioning the first text message as NFT, and I think NFTs will play an important role for enterprises going forward, and we're no different. So I'll end there. I'm talking too much. Over to another panelist.
Right, I'd actually pick up the topic that you mentioned at the very beginning of your, as you said, your longer chat, David, about the evolution, right? I mean, I think in this case of blockchain, like with many other emerging technologies, really about how this whole, both conceptually and then tangibly, it evolves throughout time, right? I think conceptually with things like this NFTs and things like that you mentioned, this is where a lot of our attention is at, but it's really what's about to come, or to come in a certain way, especially as you said, from a more enterprise perspective. If I go back a little bit to what then Angel was saying on a more tangible perspective, right? You're still in a certain way working with use cases around the digital assets, which can be people, like you said, on the identity side, which in our case, we don't work a lot on, but more on products or things, right? Which is maybe something more along the lines of what Angel or Rowan had to say. And here we've seen, okay, if you take a traditional traceability use case, how has that also evolved from our perspective in 3 years? So first you wanted to track maybe the paperwork that was going along the way and have that somehow in the blockchain. And as you learn to go through these topics, especially as a manufacturing company, you also have a look at it's not a finished good that goes out of our shelves into the, let's say, into the shelves of our retailers, was made through mixing, was made through chemical reactions, was made with a certain amount of things where you just can't represent them with paper, right? You have to find other ways to collect attributes along the supply chain, sometimes calculate things and go back into the history. But at the end of the day, as you say, you're evolving from, okay, I just want transparency and traceability along my supply chain to, okay, how will I then be able to then transfer attributes for these digital assets across it? And as further you go on this evolution, the more digital or virtual this becomes. And as I said, I guess the next evolution would be, as you said, how do we transact with these online? How do we maybe set something unique as an NFT? And now that we have all this information, how do we build consumer experiences around them?
it's going to be very interesting to see how much of all of this allows us to continue in a trust-based system, right? Where companies are issuing all of these things and they're adjudicating these themselves. You mentioned the contracts question before, David. Like if you're buying something, what will be the adjudication process? Is there going to be one individual company that is selling land, or is that going to happen from the broader network, right? Will that contract be codified on blockchain and then, verified by third parties? Will that be specifically just written and defined by this, maybe a particular person who owns a particular plot of land? We don't really know exactly how that's going to say. I will say that, 3 or 4 or even 5 years ago, it was impossible to think that a decentralized version could exist, right? Until DeFi proved that peer-to-peer transactions could occur without there being central parties. They could be safe and they could be secure and they could be trusted, and that you wouldn't need to put all of you could actually put your money into these vehicles and feel safe about the outcomes. I don't think people could have really thought through a world where the metaverse could be, or large portions of the metaverse could be decentralized. I of course, I'm highly biased coming from Chainlink Labs, but we strongly believe that a very portion of it will be decentralized. And I think that's, I don't want to keep saying the same thing over and over again, but I do think that's really going to be the interesting topic. A certain portion of the metaverse is without question going to be, run in a centralized fashion, but other parts are going to be increasingly run by the broader network and by DAOs, autonomous, right? As Rowan was mentioning. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how large companies in particular go from being in ecosystems where they control maybe everything to where they are just a participant who have a say and who have a strong opinion, and they can certainly influence outcomes, but they don't necessarily dictate outcomes the way that they had in maybe the previous scenarios. So it's going to be very fascinating to see how it plays out.
And I'll go lucky last, and I'll try and chuck in some examples of use cases that we're working on. So we're slightly different, I think, to maybe some of the panelists who operate companies, in a sense that we build a platform called the Diana platform, which companies then build a digital copy of their operations on top of, and it's a blockchain-enabled entity, right? A blockchain-enabled organization. And then we work in sectors that aren't well known for adopting digital technology, and certainly aren't well known, they don't spring to mind when you think blockchain. So some of our clients are oil and gas, for example. We work with a very forward-thinking company called Mercuria, and they're a large global commodity trading company. And we work with companies in Australia, and they provide services, asset management services to the marine sector. And in each case, we actually do really similar stuff. We do use NFTs, but we don't call them that. I don't think our clients would warm to that so much. But we use what we call kind of boring NFTs, in the sense that we run transactions across a platform, which are multi-party transactions. So in the one circumstance, we've used the platform to automate the purchase and supply of marine fuel. And we use an NFT to record every single contract that runs across that platform and the information that's in that contract. In terms of, if you think about a multiverse, and we always use the word multiverse just because the origin of meta means other, but if you can build another one, you can build many. Some I think will be more useful than others, and we're really focused on the really useful ones. And so in the case of marine fuel, we also track emissions against an asset. So like David was saying, everything in our system has an identity, whether it's a person or a thing or a company. Everything has an identity, and we use that system to track emissions, carbon emissions against, in this case, a ship, right? An asset that then can manage a carbon liability over a period of time. In a separate use case, a completely separate product, we are building a workflow which records the generation of carbon credits. And then in the multiverse, in the blockchain layer, without any human intervention, that workflow that generates credits can actually trade with that workflow that's capturing emissions. I think that's an example of an application of a technology to generate a new business model in what is a very kind of heavy industrial space where you wouldn't expect to see this technology being adopted in the way that it is. But yeah, so we are building what, are they entirely autonomous today? Not necessarily. There's still a few manual steps, but certainly we're working to take those manual steps out, slowly but surely, to get to the point where that asset, let's say a ship, can order its own fuel because it knows where it's going and it knows how much fuel it has in the tank and it knows how much fuel it's burning along the way. And so there's no reason it can't, trade in and out of markets in almost in real time, with the other platform that we've built, which sells fuel. So yeah, we use all those fancy words, DAOs and NFTs, but when we're working in that industrial sector, we tend to sort of use different language to describe it, because otherwise I think it just sort of gets associated with art and cryptocurrency and so on. But it's really a really useful tool. It can add a lot of value in the sort of most carbon intensive sectors.
Right. And Rowan, you just kind of touched on something for my next question, which is what are the main challenges of introducing the metaverse to an enterprise blockchain environment? So obviously, Rowan, as you mentioned, the language can be a bit challenging when we're speaking with enterprises. But what are some other challenges that we're seeing here?
So I think the sort of main challenges, if you look at the sum of the metaverse, so blockchain, other digital technologies, is number one, they're new. So scalability is an issue. The other thing is that you've got to remember that while we look at the metaverse and we're exploring these technologies, there's a business and a customer base to support. So you have massive ERP systems in organization, in enterprise organizations like ours, where there's that are actually supporting customers and solutions and processes now. And part of the question you have is how do you do this transition? How do you engage with these new technologies? Is it something where you integrate blockchain to enterprise systems, in which case that's something that brings challenges? Is it something that you do separately, or is it a combination of the two? So one of them is definitely scale, integration to current systems. But I think the other challenges you have is simply the landscape. So if you look at blockchain, there's many blockchains, enterprise, hybrid, public. If you look at cryptocurrencies and tokens, there's many tokens, new ones being added every day. DeFi, NFTs, CBDCs are in their infancy. How we exploit data, how we look at the sort of experience level, all new, right? So all of this is coming new at the same time. And I suppose the biggest challenge is how do we bring all of this together in a way that allows us to run the current business, but also exploit or explore the opportunity that this provides. Because I think that the key thing is that why we're here talking about this as enterprises and businesses is that it's a big opportunity. An opportunity that has been brought about by the culmination of technologies at the same time. So, for example, blockchain, I'm seeing from the audience a lot of questions on trust. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. Would the metaverse in the way that we imagine it be possible without blockchain? Maybe not, because blockchain does provide that trust layer that allows you to have a medium of exchange, so exchange of tokens of value in the metaverse, and it also will provide the means for trusted identities in the metaverse. So blockchain being key, but then you've got AR, VR, AI, all of these technologies that will also come to support this. So it's a massive opportunity that we have to look at, and that's why we're discussing it. But the challenge you have is how do you transition to it whilst maintaining your current operations?
I'm a little disappointed we're not doing this panel in VR. I mean, I have the goggles. We can get started right away. No, I'll just be 5 seconds before I give it to you, Rodolfo. To David's point, I don't believe there's any way that we could be having this conversation today without blockchain. And I think there's still a lot of blockchain skeptics out there in the traditional enterprise world. And one of the things that they absolutely miss is that you cannot have true ownership unless unless individuals feel that they have true ownership of something that exists outside of what a company is telling you that you own, right? And everything else that we own in life is something that either a government is confirming that we own, or another company is confirming that we own in some capacity. So it's just really interesting that in order to interact and to say, I genuinely own this NFT, I genuinely own this piece of land. And that's not because someone gave that to me. That's not because someone is saying it, but it's because I have this completely non-fungible existence that exists on a blockchain that can never be taken away. It is a dramatic technological innovation, which is actually leading to this conversation. Without it, I just don't think this conversation could exist. And I'm so sorry, Rodolfo, I did not.
No worries. I mean, at the end, you gave me a good segue, because, I mean, I wanted to present a counterpoint to what David said, because it is, I think, basically, it's a little bit more about understanding, and I think this is what you were referring to, William. So how do we understand this whole technological change, and therefore understand the value behind it? Because I think I steal another phrase from my team where they say, hey, technology, in every project that we discuss, technology is not going to be an issue, right? We will find a way, scalability will happen. There's lots of smart people working on making these blockchains better. What's more troubling, or what takes most of our time, is this solving this obstacle, as you said. Can people wrap their heads around what blockchain does? What are the benefits that they have for them? Why should they actually then be talking about this instead of their good old-fashioned ERP that they know and love, right? So that's kind of, think, a more challenging perspective. I think that's the one challenge we face on a daily basis, and the biggest one. I think after you've done a lot of this groundwork, the second one that we would say for enterprises is, what is the willingness for companies to be first movers, right? And I think somebody alluded in that sense, where there was kind of many companies and many blockchains, so there's a certain amount of let's say, fear of betting on the wrong one, or saying, hey, as I said, well, maybe if our customers are on, we can join, but if not, then we wait for them to see. So kind of finding these good, let's say, evangelists also within the processes or with the lines of business can also be a very big challenge for adoption.
Yeah, I think that's, everyone's highlighted it already. I think the challenges aren't unique to blockchain. They're the same challenges that people have always had in the enterprise technology space. Every time there's new tech, there's a reasonable amount of FUD, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and you've got to convince large groups of people to take risk. And I think so ultimately, like Rodolfo said, you've got to find leaders that have courage and are prepared to understand it to a degree, but then also take the risk to experiment with the project. To David's point, we often get, we have a lot of dialogue with clients around their legacy stack, but, I paid for some old technology has never been a good reason not to start using new technology. And I think it's like, if you aren't building your digital autonomous organization today, then how will you compete in this enterprise metaverse tomorrow? You won't even be there, right? It's like Jeff Bezos trying to sell books online without a web page. So it's not a kind of, I have an ERP and, that works well. Okay, fine. In the ERP, you won't be present. You won't have a footprint. You won't have a position in that new world. So those are the challenges, but they're not unique, I think, to blockchain. They're just the same old challenges we've always had trying to sell tech into enterprise, right? It's just a bit slower and a bit harder than trying to sell the same stuff to consumers.
I think you're absolutely right, Rowan. So we in Telefonica at least are lucky that we have a few leaders with enough courage, or that we jumped into it, and now we've got and it was also David a big challenge. We've got all our ERPs integrated, not only ours but also our the whole enterprise, or the whole network of enterprises. Wherever there's data that's automated, we've got it integrated in blockchain. It was a little bit of a challenge also to make everybody speak the same language, to your question at the beginning, Rachel. So but we made it happen. We had to automate also on top of blockchain some parts of the process that were not automated, that were manual, and we didn't want that because garbage in, garbage out. So that was another fun part of the project. our main challenge right now, I would say, is that I forgot to mention before, but we don't have the free forwarders or the customs in the network. We don't communicate with them. They are not part of the process. First, because it was not, like a big challenge. We didn't have big problems with them. So we didn't have ships that sink or anything. So we didn't need to track it that closely. But at some point we'll need to. And at that point, we will need to go. So right now we've got an enterprise network. So, the digital identity is not a problem. But when we go outside and we go to more public networks, what you were saying, David, is going to be a pain in the neck, absolutely, which is the digital identity. How I make sure that, Telefonica has, or someone within Telefonica has that digital identity that, nobody can question. It's basically me. And to be honest, I don't know if it's solved already, but I believe that's going to be really, really important. And then, on top of that, is I don't know if one of you mentioned it already, but it's the regulation. So, IP and all that. If I'm selling something into the multiverse, how I make sure that nobody can come in and say that they are Telefonica and sell a product that, impersonating Telefonica. Those are things that we'll need to look into in the future really closely. But I think that those are the challenges that come next.
That challenge, of course, already exists on the internet, though, right? And then there's people probably, I guarantee there's people out there trying to pretend they're Telefonica on the internet and on the telephones already. So it's just an extension of that. One thing I just quickly wanted to say about David's comment, who on my screen is that way. I don't know if for their but the first mover advantage, I think it's very, very interesting. A lot of people are waiting, and I'm not saying waiting is the worst thing in the world, but I will say, within our lifetimes, there has, without question, been significant first mover advantages that we've demonstrated. In the 90s, for the first year and a half, when the internet was coming out, there was still discussions. Articles were written by journalists as to comparing the digital economy versus the brick and mortar economy, as if they were consistently going to forever be different things. And those of us who were in the internet economy, who were always saying, this is the same thing. This is just an extension. Like, this is all going to merge. And if you don't have an internet strategy for your business, you don't have, and this was obvious to us in the Silicon Valley in 1995, but most people didn't get that, right? And the first mover advantage was absolutely outrageous. The people that got in the door first are gazillionaires, right? The same thing just happened with crypto. Everyone said, well, we'll have to see if it really plays out. The first mover advantage in crypto was insane. The people who went first, who got there first, are are basically putting their names on, stadiums all over the world. So yeah, it's true. Waiting might be a cautious and interesting approach, but I wouldn't wait too long. I wouldn't wait too long.
I would agree. It's interesting that Bitcoin is now the seventh largest global asset, and I think Ethereum is 12th or 13th. So this is ahead of the big banks, not all the banks together, but ahead of the big banks. So this is moving very, very significantly. But I would just equate it to, someone trying to swim without weights and someone trying to swim with weights. A startup can move and experiment very quickly. Enterprises historically have not moved so quickly. I'm not saying that's right. They haven't moved quickly. But what I think is that that ship has sailed now. So I think, looking at Angel, speaking to myself, Rowan may say this, but big companies are now implementing blockchain technology. Things are going into production live, ourselves, Angel, other companies. So the ship has sailed. I think though the conversation has slightly moved, because if you look at blockchain before, the stepping stone for us in enterprise was a permission blockchain. All the action is now on the public blockchains, and I think that's maybe the bridge that we need is how do you bridge from a semi-controlled environment, i.e. the permission, to public, and the conversation has definitely moved to public in that sense, in my opinion. So that's sort of where I'm coming from, but I absolutely believe that in the majority of organizations, the ship has sailed, and everybody's heading for the line of how we shape this new metaverse framework and the roles we'll play.
Right, David, you make a really good point, and I actually wanted you guys to elaborate on that public versus private within a with applying the metaverse in an enterprise ecosystem. Does anybody else have comments on that?
I see no. Go ahead, Will, first.
I'm sorry. I also feel like I'm speaking too much, but I think it's just exactly going to mirror what happens in today's world, which is that there's going to be public markets, and of course there's going to be private subnets for specific transactions or permission networks. I'm sure that there'll be coalitions of companies for the supply chain stuff, and there's other supply chain experts on the call than me. I'm sure that for the 10 companies in a supply chain, they're going to want to have their own permissioned area of the metaverse, right? But for that to be completely walled off, I think is different. I think in the past it was always going to be fully walled off, but now I think that even those subnets need to have connectivity to the broader metaverse, because they're going to they need to pull in price data, they need to pull in other information, they might need to pull in weather data, they might want to actually be able to sell insurance or consume insurance that's available in the metaverse that is based on the product suite that's going on in their little world. So without question, there's going to be permissioned areas, but more so than ever, those permissioned areas are going to have to be listening to and reacting to the data that's on the public blockchain. So there's going to be, I think, a really nice blend of the two.
Yeah,
absolutely. And sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think we see that as well, in the sense that philosophically we don't have a strong sway towards one or the other. It's kind of like horses for courses. If we're using private or permission blockchains, they have a reasonable degree of control that we can manage the cost of transacting, for example, without being worrying about a fluctuating currency. At the same time, we can always group a bunch of transactions and publish them to a private chain if there's some rationale, like you're trying to report something to a group of public people and you want to make that available. So I think it's kind of like as needed. And then at the same time, we try and be as infrastructure as agnostic as we possibly can be, in the sense that if a chain comes about and it has a good value proposition, it runs lean, it's green, it's efficient, it's scalable, the cost of transacting is low. Are we very wedded to the current infrastructure that we run on? Absolutely not. And you've got like a blockchain infrastructure arms race at the moment. And so if you're agnostic to the infrastructure, then at any point in time, I think you should be allowed to switch to whichever blockchain gives you the best value effectively.
Yeah, I was going to speak up a little bit earlier because now I felt a little bit like in the Stone Age, right? With everybody saying, no, that ship has sailed, we've moved on. I have to kind of once again place the counterpoint perspective, because generally in most of the engagements we have with our line of business, this whole topic of permission, not less, but permission, please permission. My blockchain is kind of one of our unique selling points still. So it removes a lot of the obstacles that or doors getting closed in our faces. Say, no, hey, wait a minute. We want to be transparent, but there are a certain amount of data, like you said, prices, for example, that we would never, ever share, or at least we are not yet at that cultural or mindset perspective where we could put that out there, so to speak. So, and honestly, I think at Henkel, we're quite advanced in yes, there's some stuff we want to put out there because it benefits us, it benefits the consumer, it benefits the overall industry, but you have no idea how much my team, our partners in the line of business, our key accounts have to discuss this with suppliers, with customers, and how much of kind of certainty we have to give them about the confidentiality, security, permission, fullness of the blockchain, so that they're more willing also to share their data for us in that sense. And on the second topic, as you said, around these public blockchains, it also has to do a little bit with understanding, right? So as you said, you talked to somebody and you said, hey, we've been convincing you during the last 6 months or a year to do a blockchain project with us, but we finally understood what this is about and why it's good for you, right? But you know what? Now I'm going to spend the next 6 months to introduce you to what a token is, what is gas, what is difference between a public and a private blockchain, and you're kind of then paying for their blockchain education before you can actually get anything done, right? So that's that's still a process, at least from our perspective, we need to go through. Yes, we're talking about stuff like tokens, right? You were saying for sustainability, Rowan, for example, you could potentially represent sustainability credits or attributes better through a tokenized system than you would maybe just with something else, so to speak. But these are kind of discussions we're still ongoing. And I mean, especially for those listening to the conference, I mean, yes, of course, it's important to learn what's really, as I said, going to be the future. But you got to start first before you get to the top of the mountain. You got to start at the bottom of the mountain. So just take that into account when you're also having your discussions in your enterprises or with your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I just add there that number one, if you're going to have a metaverse or a multiverse, it pulls all of these things together. So you won't have just one blockchain or one social media platform. It's got to encompass all of them. And I think the discussion, with Ethereum and others is about how you pull these things together. So you have a chain of chains. So you have an ecosystem of blockchains where you can have trust. And I think the other thing is in terms of who can see what, it depends on the consensus protocol. So if you have a channel consensus protocol rather than a full broadcast, then you can do that on a public chain. So I just counter with those two points there.
I think you guys explained much better than I was trying to explain before, which was exactly that, is that, we've got a permission blockchain that, we work ourselves and it's controlled, but, to get full advantage of the benefits that come from this kind of technologies, we need to look outside and start joining with other networks or go public with a piece of information, not all of it for sure. And that's where, we're still looking at right now, because to be honest, I don't know how to do it directly. And not from a supply chain perspective, but from a whole, from a supply chain perspective, not from a blockchain perspective, which I'm not, technically, I don't know that much.
Yeah, it's interesting how 2 years ago, enterprise blockchain was all about private networks, and today it's mainly about public. With that in mind, I'm going to go on to my next question, which is the metaverse for enterprise blockchain is still very early, and we're talking about use cases today and what we may be seeing, but what can we expect moving forward with the metaverse in the enterprise blockchain space? In the future, what can we expect to see? And anyone can start.
I hope if we get it really right, then you can expect to see a massive shift in our industrial complex away from something that's based on finite resources and linear business models, and much more towards something that's much more infinite, much more circularity. We've got much more control over the resources and how we use them and how we reuse them. I think if we use the tool for that purpose, we could really improve the productivity of that system. I think 75% of all the resources we consume is in the industrial sector, like in the supply chain. 25% of all the carbon emissions happen in the last mile. So, everything we buy and eat and so on and so forth, that counts for 25% of the emissions. 75% of what we consume as a population, as an economy, is in that really unsexy, kind of over the horizon, really industrial space. Manufacturing chemicals, delivering goods, producing energy, mining products, etc., etc. So the application there, if we get it right, we can drive a significant amount of productivity, and that in turn can increase the carrying capacity of our planet. So I think in the context of climate change, it can be a really useful tool to help us, reduce waste and improve productivity. It'll have a bunch of other cool experiences that you can plug in. You could probably put on a VR headset and go and buy your phone online in a metaverse store. I imagine at that point, you probably get a drop ship from the OEM. I don't know, or from the OEM. I don't know what that means for a company like Vodafone, but there's all those retail side cool experiences. But certainly I think the biggest impact is on that over the horizon, boring NFTs, identity, recording emissions, generating carbon credits, making a marketplace for those types of things. And that's where this technology has a green field in a sense, and also a significant role to play.
So I would look at DeFi and ask ourselves what's happened in DeFi in the last 2 years and beyond. I mean, there's a lot of different stories you could say, but I think one of the stories that's really interesting is the fact that products and services are being offered to parts of the world that have never had access to them in the past, right? You know, relatively sophisticated financial products that are being adjudicated by third-party networks are now available to small parties in Africa and Indonesia and Guatemala and wherever else. It is a dramatic change in their lives to have access to insurance products that are now being and all of this is possible because the costs have come radically down. Right, you don't have to if you're doing everything in your store. If the custody of your asset is effectively a blockchain, you don't necessarily have to have these huge, expensive infrastructure built in and around what it takes to produce and trade these goods. And so costs come way down. You can serve parts of the world that you've never been able to serve before. And I just think the same thing's going to be true for businesses. Businesses, just like the internet allowed them to basically sell to everyone on earth, well, this is going to let them go just one further level down because now it's really everyone. It's not just people who can afford $27 shipping charges to go to some random place. It's really literally everyone with an internet address or a wallet or digital wallet. So it's really a much broader universe of clients. There's a much broader universe of possible vendors. There's a much broader universe of possible partners. It's going to impact the labor market, right? I mean, an NFT specialist can live in the middle of Uganda and probably work for David in the UK for Vodafone, right? I mean, that's everything we've all been dealing with, but it's literally going to change. It's going to have a huge impact on the breadth that we all connect. You could not have predicted the Zoom revolution that we're in today 10 years ago, and you go to that next level 10 years from now. I guess you could have predicted the Zoom revolution, but certainly wouldn't have used the word Zoom. You probably would have used the word Skype. So the words that we use are going to change dramatically in the next 5 to 10 years. Words we don't even know yet, we'll be saying quite frequently in just a matter of years.
Does anyone else have anything to add there?
No. I mean, I think in the future that there are some capabilities now that will be key to that. So we spoke about the interoperability of blockchains. I think that will be key so that when we talk about metaverse business, so not enterprise metaverse business, because I think there will be some democratization of business in the metaverse. There's a number of blockchains that are providing a trust, a ledger of trust that support that, so you can automate more business processes. But I think from the experience point of view, people won't see a blockchain. They'll just see that they'll be able to take their phone if they want to travel. They can show their passport once, or not show their passport once. They can give permission to all the peoples in the chain who need to see it to check that verifiable credential out. If they want to go gaming and they need to buy something in gaming, the same verifiable credentials can be used. If they want to buy something, they can buy it with a digital token in the real world. They can earn that token in a game or in a virtual world or in a virtual business transaction. And you're seeing the convergence of digital and physical in a way that we haven't been seen before. And the big currency or the big driver around that will be data, right? And how that data in virtual and physical will converge, how it will be transacted, and how that will be used to then feed into more experiences. So I think I agree with William that there's words and things we won't know, but what we will know is that we won't be talking about blockchain. We'll be enjoying the benefits of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I agree with that. Yeah.
None of us talk about Cisco or any of the companies that run the internet, right? None of us know, and those never come up. It just happens. It's all magic. And you're exactly right. Yeah. No one's gonna have any idea whether it's Ethereum or an Ethereum clone or a proof of stake or proof of work. That's all the technical details. But the average person is just gonna swipe their phone on this and this and that, and they're gonna have access to things that they just didn't have access to before, because it's gonna be so much easier for them to get them.
Yeah, we often use the analogy of VoIP, which I think will work with Angel and David. But when it first came out, people were kind of asking what it was and figuring out how to, what do we need to do to use it. And today it's, I think, 99.9% of all your calls run over voice over IP.
So we're doing right
and you
now.
didn't have to do anything different. You just had to keep making phone calls, man. And and the infrastructure got updated in the background. I think it's very much, it's not like a big bang, super sexy tech. It's actually really boring. And it'll kind of upgrade in the background and just become a ubiquitous infrastructure that we all participate on.
Absolutely.
Right. I think what's needed now, though, also is education in order to drive the space forward when it comes to the metaverse and enterprise blockchain. So hopefully we'll start seeing more educational initiatives around that moving forward. On that note, I think we have about 10 minutes or so left in this panel. So I'm going to go ahead and take some questions from the audience because I saw some of those coming in earlier. So let me go into the chat and see some of the questions. Okay, so here's a question from an audience member. They're asking, how can we associate the metaverse and play to earn economy together?
Yeah, so I think the play to earn gaming is one of the first experiences in the metaverse. Games are becoming more sophisticated. You can play to earn. I think the next stage, and where companies like Atari are going, is that you can play to earn, so you can own things in the game. But then, the value you have in that game can be transacted to other ecosystems as well. So other games, other forms of commerce. So I think that it is a play to earn is a way of earning. It will be a way of earning income in the metaverse, and it could be that you're earning revenue from or income from the data you're producing, but by gamification in there. Or it could be straight other incentives that you have where you're buying things in the game, you're being rewarded for good performance. But I believe that what blockchain will bring and DeFi and other forms of decentralized finance and centralized finance is the ability for that to become a medium of exchange, or providing a medium of exchange for that to be transacted outside the game. So the value can persist to other ecosystems.
Yeah, I think that's already the metaverse. They're already there. They're there ahead of everyone else. That the ability of earning rewards in game and on one platform has existed forever, and I'm someone who's enjoyed games for quite some time. And now the ability to have that be transferable to other ecosystems is effectively what's happening, and it's a logical extension. It's the same thing with airline miles. It's the same thing with my coffee card. My little coffee card down the street has like 6 little punches in it. It has no value to anyone but me. But if that were if that were an NFT, well, all of a sudden now and if I were to pool that with David's and with Rodolfo's, and all of a sudden we start selling coffee credits, it's going to be fascinating, really, really interesting to see when all of these loyalty programs and all of these in-game rewards or in-platform rewards or Amazon dollars or whatever you earn by getting your cash back on your purchases on such ecosystem, when that starts potentially having value at something probably below dollar to dollar value, but some value on other ecosystems, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens in that and how people choose to build new products and services on top of that.
And just to extend that as well, it's maybe over the horizon, there's a couple of carbon credit projects where people get paid not to do things. Like a really good example is you can have a forest, right? You could have land, you can get paid not to cut down that tree. It's priceable. So I think there's also an economy which it's the same, it's analogous, can borrow from gaming, but you can pay people not to upgrade their cell phone, or you could pay people to drive less, for example. All of these things are equivalent to kind of playing a game to earn cash. You can actually start changing the way people behave by incentivizing them to do something or not to do something, and kind of netting a carbon credit to kind of pay them not to do that. So it's no different. I think it's a world of new opportunities and new business models and entirely new markets and entirely new economies. So it's a cool and exciting space.
Okay, and there are some other questions that I want to take real quick from the audience. Let's see here. David, in terms of Vodafone, how would the telecommunications industry work in the metaverse? I think we kind of touched on that, but did you want to answer that again?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. You know, if we look at basic stats, and Angel, I'm hoping will support this. There's over 5 billion smartphones in the world, right? So in terms of traction, I think there's 20 odd billion IoT devices connected. So I think telcos have a good footprint and a good touch point with people. And I think that what we can do, as well as the social media companies can do, or platforms can do, is bring ecosystem. You know, we can bring people to this new technology, and we can, you know, as Rowan was saying, you know, about voice IP, we can make it very simple for them to engage with these technologies. So simple to engage with gaming, simple to make transactions, simple to link their devices. Simple to use their IDs to enter into metaverse experiences. So I think that's where we can play a role, simply by driving adoption, maturity, and making the experience simple to use metaverse technologies and engage.
Great. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, yes, yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, we're not only the basis of where everything goes through the pipe, right? And the connectivity joining everything, but also the technology that goes on top. And we've got a close relationships with the client. So making that technology available and easy to use is also our responsibility. So fully agree.
Is the bandwidth there, guys? I mean, is there enough bandwidth to grow 10x or whatever we need to do? Is it all under your desk, Angel?
Yeah, but I think there's two different types. Sorry, Angel, you could go if you wanted to.
No. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I think there's different types of connectivity. So the way I see it, there's physical to virtual. So this is where someone's in the physical world and they want to somehow engage with a person or an entity in the virtual world. There's physical to physical. So I've earned money from a game and I want to give it to Angel. And then there's virtual to virtual, which is how you communicate with two entities in the metaverse. And I think there'll be different solutions for both of them. And I think as communications companies, we need to evolve in that. But I think you know, with the technology we have and efficiencies in the future, we can meet that.
Absolutely. I mean, the technology is there, so the fiber will play a critical role, having, you know, as much fiber as possible, because that's, you know, gives you the capacity that, you know, your software permits, and I think that will be enough. It's just, I would say, a matter of having the right amount of investment into the network and when we can do it. And there, you know, there's things like regulation, and, you know, there's a lot of things that can influence that. But I think it's just a matter of having enough investment. Yeah.
If I may add one quick point, I know I'm talking a lot, but also the efficiency we talk about, you know, with verifiable credentials, where you give people permission to see it rather than doing it, that can actually drive down the demand for communications in one area and allow us to push that towards other areas where there's new demand as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and ask maybe the last question here. So someone from the audience is asking, do we think Google Maps could be ported into becoming the next global metaverse? I see no need for physical addresses like home addresses in the future, just an address where you currently are, since everything will be automated / internet based. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if you've seen the application. If you haven't got it, I highly recommend it. It's quite fun. There's an app called What 3 Words. So there's a company that's divided the world into 3-meter square blocks. And if you put your address in, it'll actually give you 3 words, like 3 random words, right? Like goose, mirror, cup. But then that's actually an address. It's a unique address for that 3 square meter block. And they're doing something not dissimilar to that question. So they're allowing you to take a sort of, you know, take a photo of something in that 3-meter block and then say, yeah, here's an experience that occurred at this time, in this space, on this day, so that you can kind of recreate history in a sense, or a timeline, a chronological series of events in that space-time block, which is a weird concept, but it's a fun application, and they're starting to do something not dissimilar. The logic being you could kind of buy space-time, an area of space-time for a portion of history, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I guess it would depend also on the use case, right? I think what you said could lend itself to what the person was asking on the question of if I want to find a person or a unique asset anywhere. You could potentially, as you said, move that into the digital world and just have that link done there. And of course, I mean, you can think of, well, then I can deliver no matter if you're at home, at office, walking down the street, doesn't matter, really. If we look at it from the other perspective of the metaverse, is I guess you would have to ask yourself, well, how much of what the real world we have today we want to port into the virtual world, right? So do I really want to have my street and my office, etc., or would I rather live in Decentraland or some other sort of fantastical world out there, right? But that, I guess, we will have to.
I want to be very clear that I will have hair in the metaverse.
What's great about the metaverse also is that we're seeing virtual fashion, and you can buy these outfits, and some of them are quite expensive on some of the apps that I have, and you can wear anything you want in the metaverse. So there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We've got about 1 more minute. Let's see if we can answer just one more question. Well, one of the audience members made the point Meta might become the new entry point to CRMs. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept that from an enterprise perspective, the concept of this very functional style technology will go away in the blockchain world, because you can kind of stitch workflows together end to end across multi-companies, across sectors, across experiences. The idea that you'd have a kind of CRM software to manage a small piece of a process, I think that's a bit old school. I think that's where a lot of the enterprise disruption will occur. It's the same with kind of anything that has the word E. If the E stands for enterprise and it's functionally driven, it's planning technology for the planning team, or it's logistics technology for the logistics team, or it's finance technology for the finance team. The minute you start to build those end-to-end flows across supply chains, across functions, I mean, there's no silos in Web 3.0. So anything that's designed around a particular function, I think, has a finite life in the Web 3 universe. So yes, I think you kind of see CRM as a category of software over a period of time will either change and evolve or just disappear entirely.
I'll just quickly add, CRM in the metaverse will equal self-sovereign decentralized identity, digital identity. So the digital identity, self-sovereign digital identity will essentially be the CRM of the metaverse, and it will be distributed.
Got it.
Yep. I was just going to say, I mean, at the end of the day, David's right? I mean, we still got to sell stuff to people, right? So if we can now do that in a certain more decentralized ways as the way data is collected and processed now, then maybe, yes, indeed, as you said, so we would need to do some sort of these activities in the metaverse instead of in these siloed applications that we do today.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I mean, we could keep talking about this topic forever, but our panel is now over. So I just want to thank all of you guys for joining us. Thank you to the European Blockchain Convention. Thank you to the panelists. It's been great. And yeah, hopefully we can further explore this topic moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Fun, a fun discussion
Bye.
that, it has a lot of examples and ideas that how we want the future, our digital lives to be, right? So it has a lot of options up there still to create all of them. So thank you to all panelists. That's all for this session, but we still have 4 or 5 sessions still left. So we will cover some gaming, metaverse also, but also crypto regulation. So a lot of topics still to cover. Thank you. See you in a bit.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Nice
very
to meet
much.
you.
That was
Bye-bye.
cool. Good fun.